Our reading today is from Exodus 17, verses 1 through 7. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages, as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do for this people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?"
Friends, will you pray with me? And as you feel so familiar and comfortable, I invite you to join in the second time through. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God. Amen. Andrea Gibson died 2 weeks ago, and my heart cracked open. Gutted and bereft, I wondered at the flow of tears for a person I knew only on the internet. But that was the way they were, spinning poems of grit and vulnerability like Charlotte and Some Pig, letting us into their heart and their love and their grief, and worrying about our feelings, even as they were dying. I kept thinking of another poet and her words, and I shared them with a widow, mourning her beloved who lived a long, good life. Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? The robots in the book I read chose mortality because that is the way of everything, to break down and become other things. I told someone we feed the future, and that's true, except we try very hard not to preserve our bodies, or what's left of them after cremation, for some unknown later, to separate ourselves from nature, from creation, like we are other, like we are special, like we are like God forever. That is supposed to be the miracle, the promise, the end of death. But doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Doesn't there have to be death to feed the life of the future? Admitting it doesn't mean we have to like it. Isn't it odd, Moscap says, that every being fears the only thing that's for certain? We are not special, not separate. We are nature. We are part of creation, put together from bits of stardust billions of years old and other beings that have died. Life is here, Not elsewhere, not given or taken away, not made. Maybe that's what God was trying to tell the wanderers back then, with the manna and the water from the rock, what yet another poet called the ancient faith. What we need is here. A friend and I were talking this week. My wife, she said, grows medicinal plants, but most people would call them weeds. What makes a plant a weed exactly? Growing where you don't want them, usually, and also stubborn and pervasive and hard to eliminate. They take over if left unchecked. Odd, isn't it? How we struggle and fight to keep things neat and tidy, to have lawns and sterile environments, but the weeds and a particular mold, which grew by accident on a petri dish and saved millions of lives, can heal us. What we need is here. The knotweed everyone hates has been shown to be more effective against the bacterium that causes Lyme disease, which everyone fears, than antibiotics. I think my front yard is sending me a message, covered in chamomile, which looks like a sea of tiny, happy daisies, but also gifts me with a calming tea. And on, one weed after another, nettle and dock and plantain and every lawn hound's nemesis, dandelion. But really, how can you hate such a fuzzy, sunny flower that transforms into a sphere full of wishes and delight? Red raspberry leaf, echinacea, elderberry, jewelweed, lady's thumb, and yes, even kudzu. And now I sound like a witch, probably, which is how the church got involved in this whole thing, and is certainly how what was common knowledge became magic, suspicious, alternative, woo. But science is catching up, because it's not real if it's not tested and published. But now even scientists are suspect, because what even is truth? But I digress. I know it seems like the world is a lot right now. Because, well, it is. And maybe it's not just right now, but often is, was, has been. We just know more. Moses didn't have a smartphone, after all. But maybe the path to healing what ails us, and that's an all-inclusive term, isn't out there somewhere, waiting to be invented or made, but is already here. In the forests that lower our blood pressure and embrace our screams when we rage over genocide and war and starvation and poverty and wannabe fascists and climate change and stupid effing cancer that takes away people we love and creatives who weave words and feelings and social commentary so tightly they can be wrapped around your shoulders like a shroud of protection, comfort, courage, healing. The repair for what is broken is in community, in working together, in eating together, in learning and crying and laughing and playing and being together. The answers to our questions, our demands, our complaints, our tests and quarrels, masas and meribas, already exist. What we need is here, in the grasshopper, in the wild geese, in the weeds, in each other. The answer is not on the internet, unless the World Wide Web, and I'm showing my age here, introduces you to poets like Andrea, who even now reminds us that dying is the opposite of leaving, and that even death, when visiting, wants to be tucked in like a child and loved.